In this list, I'll go over cards which have effects that activate in the graveyard independently of the time they are sent to the graveyard. So basically, no floating effects, just graveyard effects that can be activated from the graveyard while the card has existed in the graveyard for a while already. And at number 10, we have Mezuki. This card has the graveyard effect, where you can banish it from the graveyard to special summon any other zombie monster from your graveyard. Because Mezuki exists, zombies have a huge type advantage when it comes to bringing themselves out from the graveyard. And Mezuki was even on the limited list for a long time, though it's currently at 3 copies. And that's because, in addition to the really good graveyard effect of reviving any zombie from the graveyard, its effect is also a soft once per turn, in the fact that it's not once per turn at all. It's just, in order to special summon a zombie from the graveyard, you need to banish this card from the graveyard. So, if you're able to put this card back into the graveyard from the banish zone, you can use it as many times as you want on your turn. Which is why Burial from a Different Dimension was also limited for a long time. It's still considered a strong card because of its really good graveyard effect. There just isn't a good zombie deck in the current meta. And there are cards with more versatile graveyard effects in the game, which is why Mezuki is only at number 10 on this list. And at number 9, we have Orcust Harp Horror. This card is a lot like Mezuki, where you can banish it from the graveyard to special summon a monster, except its graveyard effect is restricted to only the Orcust archetype, and it's able to special summon an Orcust monster from your deck. But unlike Mezuki, Harp Horror has a hard once per turn on its graveyard effect, and locks you into only special summoning dark monsters for the rest of the turn. But here's what's so good about Orcust Harp Horror. It can special summon a monster from the deck, and special summoning from the deck is the best place to special summon a monster from. And being able to special summon a monster from the deck with a graveyard effect is incredibly strong, to the point where I was kind of surprised by this effect when I first saw the card. And there's a reason why this card sees a lot of play, and is ran in almost as many copies as possible in Orcust decks, or just in decks that can afford to use the Orcust engine. Because even with all of its downsides, being able to special summon a monster from the deck by using a resource from your graveyard is super good, and it's only at a low spot on this list because this card is restricted to one archetype only, whereas all the other ones are a little bit more generic. And at number 8, we have Blackwing Zephyros the Elite. This card has the effect that, while it's in your graveyard, you can return any face-up card you control to your hand in order to special summon this card from the graveyard, but then you take 400 points of damage. Now, this is a really good effect, as both of its costs can actually be beneficial in addition to its really good effect of bringing itself back from the graveyard. And that's why this card has a very justifiable once per duel clause to its effect. And this won't be the only once per duel effect you'll see on this list. Now, a card which can special summon itself from your graveyard is really good, and this card's able to do that pretty easily. But here's how you can take advantage of its costs. There are many spell and traps which you'd happily want to return to your hand, like Brilliant Fusion after your Seraphonite has been linked away, or a Call of the Haunted-like card after its target has been removed from the field. There's also certain monsters you'd want to return to your hand, field spell cards, some monsters being treated as equip cards. There's so many good ways to make use of this effect's cost that it can almost be considered a benefit to the card. And the fact that you take 400 points of damage means you can proc Thousand Blades effect, another really good graveyard effect, to get 2 level 4 monsters on the field at the same time. Zephyros is just really good, and easily earns a spot on this list. And at number 7, we have Phantom Knight's Fog Blade. Pretty much the entire Phantom Knight's archetype has graveyard effects, and a lot of those graveyard effects are really good. So for this list, I decided to choose one Phantom Knight card, and the reason I chose Fog Blade over all the other Phantom Knight cards is because it also has a really good on-field effect as well. When this card is on the field, you can negate the effect of one effect monster on the field, and then as long as this card is face up on the field, that monster keeps its effect negated, cannot attack, and also cannot be an attack target. So, right off the bat, it's basically a Fiendish Chain, a trap card that used to be a staple in a lot of people's deck because of how good it was. But the power creep of the game has got to the point where it's not as good anymore. Now, in addition to Fogblade basically being a Fiendish Chain, it can also be used to stop the battle phase if you use it on one of your own monsters. Because if the card cannot be an attack target, that doesn't mean your opponent can all of a sudden attack directly. That just means they can't attack. So you can completely stall out a battle phase with one Fog Blade, which makes Fog Blade actually a little bit better than Fiendish Chain, on top of the fact that it also has a graveyard effect, where you can banish this card from the graveyard to special summon a Phantom Knight monster from your graveyard. So basically a Mezuki effect for Phantom Knight monsters. And since some of the other Phantom Knight monsters have graveyard effects to search out Fog Blade, they synergize very well with each other to the point where they can be run as an engine in other non-Phantom Knight decks. And at number 6, we have another trap card on this list, and that's Lost Wind. Lost Wind has the effect where you can target one special summon monster on the field, and then permanently negate its effect and cut its original attack in half. Now, that's a really good effect, but if that's all it did, it wouldn't see as much play as it does now. Its graveyard effect is that if your opponent special summons a monster from their extra deck while this card is in the graveyard, you can set this card on your side of the field from the graveyard, but then it gets banished when it leaves the field. So basically, its effect is really good, and you get to use it twice. Or, if Lost Wind is milled directly from your deck to the graveyard, or sent there in some other way, you'll be able to use Lost Winds for free, giving Lost Winds more versatility than Fog Blade, which is kind of restricted to a Phantom Knight's engine. You can throw Lost Winds into basically any deck. You do have to have a deck specifically designed to make use of Fog Blade though, which is why Lost Winds is at a higher spot. And at number 5, we have the only spell card on this list, and that's Metalfoes Fusion. Metalfoes Fusion has the effect where you can fusion summon one Metalfoes Fusion monster by using materials from your hand or field as the fusion materials. So basically a polymerization for the Metalfoes archetype. Almost no one uses this card for that effect. So now let's go over its graveyard effect. If this card is in your graveyard, you can shuffle it back into your deck to draw one card. This graveyard effect is so good that many people play Metalfoes Fusion without having any way to use its first effect at all, specifically just because of its graveyard effect. Some decks will even play 3 copies of Foolish Burial Goods just to send Metalfoes Fusion directly from the deck to the graveyard in order to draw one card, like Sky Striker players for example, who want a lot of spell cards in the graveyard. And even non-Sky Striker decks can take advantage of Metalfoes Fusion graveyard effect with Foolish Burial Goods, as that translates to an upstart goblin in card economy, or allows you to go hand neutral, which allows you to cycle through your deck better. And since Metalfoes Fusion returns itself to the deck as part of its effect, that means you only ever have to play one copy of Metalfoes Fusion, even if you play 3 copies of Foolish Burial Goods. And at number 4, we have Glow Up Bulb. Glow Up Bulb has the effect that while it exists in your graveyard, you can mill the top card of your deck to the graveyard in order to special summon this card from the graveyard, but you can only use this effect once per duel. Now, what makes this a really strong effect is the fact that Glow Up Bulb is a tuner monster. Tuner monsters are infinitely more valuable if they can special summon themselves, and Glow Up Bulb is able to special summon itself the easiest out of all of them, in the best possible way, directly from the graveyard with a good cost in order to bring itself out, as that one card mill is actually a positive effect for many decks. And back in the OCG, when both Needle Fiber and Summon Sorceress were live in the game at the same time, Glow Up Bulb was a 1-card rank 4 monster, as you could do some link plays with Needle Fiber and Summon Sorceress in order to easily bring out a rank 4 monster with cards in your deck. That all starts with a single Glow Up Bulb in hand. And this is part of the reason why Glow Up Bulb is banned in the OCG. But I think that's more of the fact that they actually have Needle Fiber over there, whereas the TCG has yet to get that card. As Needle Fiber is a link monster who's able to special summon any level 3 or lower tuner monster from your deck, and it's really easy to bring out, which is an incredibly powerful effect on an easy to bring out monster. And Glow Up Bulb was even banned in the TCG for a long time, only coming off the ban list once synchro monsters stopped being in the meta. And at number 3, we have Destrudo, the Lost Dragon's Frisson. This card has the effect that while it's in your hand or graveyard, you can target one level 6 or lower monster you control, pay half your life points, and then special summon this card from your hand or graveyard. But then this card's level is reduced by the level of that monster, and also this card goes to the bottom of your deck if it leaves the field. So basically, it can special summon itself from your graveyard by paying half your life points. Now, what makes this card really good is that this card has a lot about it that synergizes really well with a wide variety of decks. It basically allows you to easily go into level 7 synchro monsters. It allows you to get an easy monster on the field for link plays. It allows you to get an easy tuner monster on the field, like Glow Up Bulb. It's of the dark attribute, so it fits in Orcust decks. It's dragon type, so it fits in dragon-based decks. And it has an optional effect to be used from your hand as well as your graveyard, so you don't have to rely on a discard to get it in the graveyard, like you would with maybe a Glow Up Bulb. It's just a really good combo extender that's almost never dead in your hand, and is even better if it does make it to the graveyard, even if you do have to pay half your life points to bring it out. Destrudo is probably one of the most played monsters with a graveyard effect in the game right now, because it fits in so many different kinds of decks pretty easily. And at number 2, we have Destiny Hero Malicious. This card has been on and off the semi-limited list so many times since it was first introduced that it's basically the poster boy for why the semi-limited list exists. If this card was limited to 1, it would be useless. If it's limited to 2, it's somewhat playable. But if it's at 3 copies, then it's all of a sudden kinda broken. So what this card does is you can banish this card from your graveyard to special summon another copy of this card from your deck. And like I said with Orcust Harp Horror, a graveyard effect in order to special summon a monster from your main deck is one of the best effects you can have in the game. And Destiny Hero Malicious is not once per turn, nor does it restrict your special summoning for the turn, but it is more limited on its targets, unlike Harp Horror, as it can only special summon other copies of itself. That's not really a big deal, as long as you just use those monsters for more link plays, or other plays which require warrior monsters, dark monsters, hero monsters, or level 6 monsters, and all of those things are pretty valuable things to have out on the field, which is why this card is currently on the semi-limited list. Basically, because its warrior tag is really strong right now, with cards like Isolde existing. And at number 1, we have Tempest, Dragon Ruler of Storms. Now, for this list, I made a rule that I would not include any banned cards, because otherwise this list would look a little bit different, as there is currently 5 cards on the banned list that are there because of their graveyard effects. And it's not that I don't include banned cards in my video, I just make the call on a video by video basis whether or not I'll include banned cards or not. And I thought this video would be better if I only talked about legal cards. That way you could use it as a reference for which good graveyard cards exist in the game right now. And I say all this because until the very recent ban list, all of the Dragon Rulers were banned. And then they took Tempest off the ban list for some reason, while leaving the other 3 Dragon Rulers on the ban list. Now, all of the Dragon Rulers are incredibly powerful, and they are widely regarded as one of the strongest archetypes in the game's history. And that's because each Dragon Ruler does so many different things, as they each have 3 good effects. And 2 of them are graveyard effects. So, each Dragon Ruler has their 3 effects, but you can only use one of those 3 effects per turn, and they have a hard once per turn on this. So, what Tempest does specifically is if it's in your hand or graveyard, you can banish 2 wind and or dragon type monsters from your hand or graveyard in order to special summon this card, which right off the bat is a really good effect. There's a couple of other cards on this list specifically because they can special summon themselves from the graveyard, and this card's effect works from the hand as well, and has a wide range of targets you can use for its cost, in addition to having good base stats on the card itself on top of it all. Now, its other graveyard effect is that if this card is banished, you can add 1 wind dragon type monster from your deck to your hand. Now, this doesn't have to be a graveyard effect, it doesn't matter where Tempest is banished from, but it does work from the graveyard, and that is the best place to banish Tempest for this effect. So it technically counts as being a second graveyard effect. And this search effect is really good, as it would even allow you to search out another copy of itself, if this card wasn't limited to 1 of course. And on top of 2 graveyard effects, it also has a second hand effect, where you can discard this card and another wind monster from your hand in order to search out any 1 dragon type monster from your deck, which is a really good search effect, especially since you're getting this card into the graveyard and it has 2 potential graveyard effects. So the reason this card is at number 1 is because what's better than having 1 graveyard effect? How about having 2 graveyard effects, including a hand effect that allows you to put yourself into the graveyard even easier? And nothing can really take the top spot away from a Dragon Ruler, and that's why Tempest is at number 1. Alright, and that's the list. If you think I missed any other good graveyard effects that should have made this list over the ones that did appear in the video, I'd love to hear about them down in the comments, as well as ideas for future videos just like this one.